So today, we're going to talk about one of the most dramatic stories in all of economic history, the Great Depression. It's this wild tale of how a decade of incredible prosperity, a real party, crashed, and I mean literally crashed, into a decade of some of the worst hardship imaginable.
So you got to ask yourself, how does that even happen, right? How does an entire country go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows seemingly overnight? From optimism to total despair in the blink of an eye. That's the big question we're going to tackle right now.
Okay, so to really get a handle on the crash, you first have to understand the party that came before it. So let's jump in our time machine and head back to the Roaring '20s. This was a time of just unbelievable economic boom and huge cultural shifts.
So, picture this. World War I is over, and American industry, which had been cranking out tanks and weapons, suddenly pivots. All of a sudden, these factories are churning out these incredible new gadgets for the home. We're talking electric toasters, vacuum cleaners, and, for the first time ever, cars that an average family could actually afford. And this, right here, this is the engine that powered that whole boom. Incredible, game-changing innovation. Look at what Henry Ford did with the moving assembly line. It was absolutely revolutionary. He took the time to build a Model T for more than 12 hours, all the way down to just 90 minutes. Think about that. This wasn't just about making cars faster. No, this was about making the entire modern world affordable for everyone.
But, there's always a catch, isn't there? This whole roaring new economy, it was running on a brand new and, as it turns out, very dangerous fuel: credit. For the very first time, buy now, pay later became this national obsession. People were financing everything on installment plans, from their radios to their shiny new cars.
And of course, that habit didn't stop with a new toaster. It spread all the way to Wall Street, which basically turned into a casino for regular folks. The big game was something called buying on margin. And the idea itself is actually pretty simple. You just borrow money from your stockbroker to buy way more stock than you could ever afford on your own.
And this is where things get really wild and really dangerous. You could walk in with just $10 of your own cash, and your broker would lend you the other $90. Suddenly, you're controlling $100 worth of stock. As long as the market was climbing, hey, you were a financial genius. But what happens when that music stops and the market starts to fall?
Yeah, this quote just perfectly captures the absolute frenzy of the time. The stock market became this national obsession. It really felt like everybody was getting rich. And this belief that stocks could only go up was so powerful that, you could get stock tips from your barber or the person shining your shoes. It was everywhere.
Well, every great party eventually comes to an end, right? But this one didn't just wind down. Oh no, it ended suddenly, catastrophically. The music didn't just fade out, it came to a dead, screeching halt.
So it's late October 1929, and all that confidence that had been fueling the boom, it starts to crack. It begins with a few jitters, Then, on October 24th, we now call it Black Thursday, there's a really sharp drop. And that sparks a wave of panic. But the real knockout punch comes 5 days later. The floor just completely falls out. October 29th, Black Tuesday. That was the day.
On that one single day, $14 billion in wealth just evaporated. Poof, gone. Now, to put that into perspective for you, in today's money, that's over $200 billion. Vanished in just a matter of hours.
So here's the really crucial part to understand. It was a chain reaction, a domino effect. Okay, so first, the market crashes. Bam. Then the brokers start making these things called margin calls, basically screaming, "Pay us back the money we lent you, now." But of course, nobody had the money. You had people who were millionaires on paper one day and completely bankrupt just a few days later. And to make matters so much worse, the banks had been playing the same reckless game. So they started to fail too, taking everyone's life savings right down with them.
And a crash like this, it doesn't just stay on Wall Street, it spread like a virus to every single corner of the country, and then around the world. It was the beginning of a whole decade of just unimaginable human suffering.
Just look at this jump. It's staggering. In 1929, before everything fell apart, unemployment in the U.S. was hovering around a pretty normal 3%. But by 1933, it had skyrocketed to 25%. Let that sink in. 1 out of every 4 working people was out of a job. This wasn't just a recession anymore. This was a total collapse of society as they knew.
And the reality for everyday people was just grim. You had bread lines snaking for blocks in every city. Families who lost their homes were forced to build these little shacks out of scrap wood and cardboard. They called these towns Hoovervilles, a bitter jab at the president they blamed for it all. And it didn't stop at the border. The U.S. started calling in all its international loans, which basically kickstarted the collapse of the already fragile economies over in Europe.
And as if a total economic meltdown wasn't bad enough, Mother Nature decided to pile on. A terrible years-long drought hit the Great Plains. You combine that with years of really aggressive farming, and boom, you get the Dust Bowl. The American heartland literally turned into a desert. We're talking about massive dust storms. They called them black blizzards that would just bury entire farms. Millions of desperate families, the so-called Okies, had no choice but to pack up and head west, hoping for a better life in California.
But, even in the absolute depths of that despair, the country decided it needed a new path forward. And in 1933, a new president came into office, and he came with a promise of bold, persistent experimentation.
And with those famous words, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, signaled a massive shift in thinking. His goal wasn't just to fix the economy, it was to restore the nation's confidence, its very spirit. And he didn't waste any time. He immediately launched this huge wave of government programs that we now call the New Deal. So the New Deal basically went on the attack on three main fronts. First, you've got mass unemployment. The solution? Big jobs programs like the CCC and the WPA, which put millions of people back to work building roads, bridges, and parks all across the country. Then you've got the broken financial system. The fix? Creating things like the SEC to police Wall Street and the FDIC to ensure your money in the bank. And finally, you have all this poverty and insecurity. The answer? A social safety net, the creation of Social Security.
Now, the New Deal was, without a doubt, a critical lifeline. It saved millions from absolute ruin. But most historians will tell you it wasn't the thing that ended the Depression. The final knockout blow to the Great Depression was actually World War II. That massive industrial effort needed for the war, that's what finally wiped out unemployment and got the factories roaring again for good.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway here? Well, the Great Depression is this incredibly powerful reminder of how fast things can go wrong, how a mix of wild optimism and super easy credit can blow up a massive bubble, and just how devastating it is for everyone when that bubble finally bursts. Which, of course, leaves us with one big critical question. Are we paying attention to the warning signs today?